So guys, I thought this would be pretty funny to do, to be honest with you. We've got about a minute left till the New Zealand dollar GDP news comes out. Disclaimer, I do not trade news, but this is a little old trick that I used to use back in the day, and I thought it would be really fun to try it again. Now, more often than not, with the New Zealand dollar news, there isn't too much movement because the New York and London stock exchanges have closed. Volumes obviously a little bit less. With the forecast for this news, it's actually hawkish, and the New Zealand banks are actually ready for this. So we may not see a huge movement, but what we can expect is if there's a high read-in, it will be seen as positive or bullish for the New Zealand dollar, while a falling trend is normally seen as negative or bearish for the New Zealand dollar. So we'll see what happens. Of course, as I said, this is not me promoting trading news. This is just something that I thought would be really fun to try out. We'll see what happens. And of course, we'll get some of you a lot of feedback from it. Let's see. So we're starting to see movement now. This is pre-news movement. And we'll see which way this plans to dive. So we've been triggered into a buy stop into this trade, and the news has been released. So as we said, the news was hawkish, or the forecast was hawkish. So we just want to see a continued pump to the upside. We'll cancel our sell stop now, and we'll make sure we just manage this trade as best as possible. And we have our stop loss in place anyway. So if price action turns against us, then of course we'll get stopped out, but that's not a problem. And when taking a trade, we're always managing our risk as best as possible. So we just need everybody to just get onto the news and get these orders flowing. And we've got a 1-to-3 risk reward ratio here. We've got 5 pip stop loss, 15 pip target, 1% risk, and 3% gain. And we'll give it a minute or two for the news to get out to everybody and see if we just get the final pump to the upside that we need. The risk on this trade now will be moved to half. So now we're only going to be losing 0.5% of this trade to gain a further, well, not further, a 3% gain on the whole trade in itself. If we don't get a push to the upside anytime soon, we'll start thinking about closing the trade because we don't want to be trapped in this trade and start finding some sort of resistance at some of these major areas where potentially sell orders are placed, okay? So let's give it a second or two. Still having the bullish movement. If we start to get a reaction in and around these areas here and price starts to retrace, then of course we know what to do. Furthermore, just as a management of this trade now, we've got the news. So we'll move this trade to break even when our risk free. We'll either get taken out break even or we'll hit our final target, which is our take profit above. Not a huge movement by this pair, as I would like, but we were triggered in with a buy stop and currently sitting at around 1.5 to 1 on this pair. Usually the rule of thumb is if news is released, high impact news, usually it takes about 15 minutes for price action to start taking effect. With this, I'm not going to be waiting that long. Probably giving another 3 minutes or so and then see if we hit take profit. So we're coming to this major resistance area on the market. We're almost at take profit now. So we'll trail our break-even trade into slight profits so that we're not losing anything out on this. If price starts to retrace, I'm almost sure we'll get a further pump to the upside. We'll close at the area of retracement because we know this is where price is struggling. We're not too far from our take profit now, so let's just fingers crossed, hope for the best, and call it a day. So here we go. We've got the retracement from that level, as I mentioned. If price action manages to get back here again, then I'll be very happy that it has done so, and we'll take some profits. In terms of making sure that we don't lose too much, I'll make sure that I trail my stops now into some sort of profits so that we don't have to pay any commissions on this trade, okay? Now, this reaction that's happened more often than not is because of the sell orders that probably are placed here by multiple retail traders. And when there's news more often than not, and there's a pump to the upside, you're going to get a reaction from these levels. And this is what we call a potential retracement level. If you are studying my Instagram, my trades, and my videos that I post, you'll find that more often than not, I'll be taking profits in and around these areas, or at least 8% of my profits, especially when there's a huge move to the downside or upside, because when we come into major areas, you're going to get a reaction almost 90% of the time. How much? We don't know, but more often than not, that's what's going to happen. So we're 5 minutes after the news released or thereabouts. We see the retracement. We have our break-even trade set in place, and we were so close to our take profit. With this retracement happening, it's very unlikely that we're going to push back up. If we do, for whatever reason, it'll be all good. If we don't, we're taking small profits on this trade, had a little bit of fun, and we're calling it a day, okay? Now, what I'll tell you, most people that trade news, you'll find that they'll take a sell, take a buy on a trade, and they'll see the price push up, and it will come into a major area in the market. What happens in an instance like this is they start to get disheartened that their take profit hasn't been hit, and what do? They start to close a trade, and they start piling on sells. And what you'd find, as I said, it usually takes about 15 minutes for the news to take effect. Price will then start to move in their direction to the downside. Let's just think that this is a down arrow, and then it will start to go against them, back in the direction that the news was forecasted. What happens then? They start to sell every single resistance level that comes in their way, thinking that price is going to continue going down against the forecast of the news. So one thing I would say for those that trade news, not that I want to promote it, but just for those that do, if the directional bias of news is up and you see the movement is up and you continue your trades in that direction, if the movement is down or the news is down, forecasted down, and continue taking your trades in a sellish moment, in a bearish momentum, okay? Because you want to go with the majority, not the minority. So we're 4 minutes away from 15 minutes of the news being released. We should, if we have enough buyers come into the market, see this price action come back to this level. If we do at this point in time, we will be taking profit, or at least a good 80% of it, to then obviously, just for ego's sake, get our take profit. If not, then we're going to assume that the new 15-minute candle's opened. We're going to pull back to create a wick, which will potentially take us out at our break-even / profit trade, okay? So I'll stay quiet for a minute and let's see what happens. So even though we have had this high impact news released, as mentioned, we probably won't see a huge move, simply because the New Zealand dollar banks kind of forecasted this to happen. So they're not going to obviously be too phased by this. They're not going to be backing against themselves or for themselves. And more often than not, this is going to stay unchanged. I haven't personally looked at the news. This is the calendar itself. The news release came out as, where are we at? pretty positive, to be honest with you. More positive than the forecast. Not so much the previous. This was an actual. This was more than. This was more than. We should have had a bigger move to the upside, to be honest with you. But with the GDP annual average for quarter two, it was actual. So we've got a balance here, and we can see the price action obviously illustrating that. We've got about 5 minutes and 53 seconds left of this trade. Let's see what happens. We want to see this continue pumping up to come back to our levels. We're holding above, which is pretty good for now. But we're in, as I said, break-even profit. Let's see what happens. So I'm monitoring this very closely. I'll close this manually because I don't expect a sharp rally to the downside. If we start to push and just get below this, then I'm still taking a little bit of profit off of this trade, probably about 0.3%, which ain't too shabby, to be honest with you. Seeing as this is not a technical analysis trade, this is a fundamentals trade. So any little bit of profit always counts. Now recapping this trade, what I will say to myself is anytime I see a strong pump to the upside and I'm this close to my take profit, probably would have liked a little bit more in and around these areas here, just shy of my take profit. Usually I'm closing this manually. I didn't do it in this instance because the move was really strong to the upside. And now looking at the news, we should have pushed a bit higher. But I did mention once we come to these major areas, more often than not, we're going to get a reaction. We certainly did get the reaction. I didn't expect it to be as much as it is, but we have, and that's why we've had this movement to the downside, okay? Another little strategy that I used to use back in the day for NFP is using major levels to not take the side that the news was forecasted or the news was released, but to take the side, the opposite side when price came back to a major level, because as I said, more often than not, you'll get a reaction from these levels and you scalp it that way. But I'm not a fundamental trader anymore. So let's just see what happens. If we can hold this and get a push to the upside. We've got about 3 minutes, 33 seconds left of this trade. Okay, so there we have it. Trade's closed now. Just a little bit of insight, regardless if we hit take profit or not, we still come out of the trade with slight profit. I hope you found this useful moving forward. We were so close, yet so far. Anyway, have a good evening, take care, and good night for now.